Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the 8th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, Long High Remembrance Service. To start the proceedings today, it's my pleasure once again to welcome one of our own in Lieutenant Colonel Adrian Lombardo, who is not simply one of our own, he is also one of the Shrine trustees, and he will give us a welcome on behalf of the Shrine. Colonel Lombardo. Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you, Neil. It's wonderful yet again to see you all here on this 51st anniversary of our service in Vietnam. So on behalf of the trustees and all of the staff and volunteers here, I do welcome you. And it's amazing that ever since the 50th anniversary, we all look so much younger. So welcome again. Cheers.
Thank you, Adrian. My name is Neil Smith. I think I've met most of you, and it's very pleasing to see a few fresh faces here today, despite obviously the COVID problems that we've been experiencing. And don't forget, please, in case you sort of tend to cuddle together, that we really do need to try and keep this social distancing thing going. And in line with the requirements of COVID-19, of course, this is also being streamed today, which I like to think is going to be provide for a fairly good outcome, because I hope that there'll be a lot of people at home who might not otherwise have been able to participate, albeit remotely today. So we've got a program pretty much similar to what we've had in the past. There will be one difference, which I'll come to in a little while. But to start the matters rolling now, what I would do is to welcome our President, Dennis Moss, who will have a few words to say to us by way of welcoming you to our Long High Remembrance Day service today. So Dennis Moss, sir, thank you.
Welcome, everybody. Once again, we remember those men from 8th Ra who died serving our country in South Vietnam, especially on this day 51 years ago. I thought today we could try to put the reason for their sacrifice into some perspective. It all started with the defeat of the French in 1954 in what was called Indochina. Soon after, a new Vietnam was created and split into the Communist North and the Democratic Republic of Vietnam in the South. There followed growing unrest in the South, spawned by the Communist National Liberation Front. At the request of the South Vietnamese government, and in line with our treating agreements in the region, US, Australian and other advisors began to arrive in South Vietnam in 1962. The deteriorating military situation soon resulted in sizable US and Australian and other ground forces being deployed in combat roles. The commitment continued to grow, with our Navy providing gunfire and logistic support. The RAAF also made a significant contribution with bomber and transport aircraft, plus the ubiquitous Iroquois helicopters, which were so essential to our 8th Ra men. From the beginning, the Australians clashed frequently with small groups of Viet Cong, or VC as they were termed, plus the North Vietnamese Army regulars. Despite many tactical successes as demonstrated by 8th Ra and other battalions, public opinion in Australia and the US became stridently anti-war and was exacerbated by the diverse conscription issue and mounting casualties. Despite the apparent success of the Paris peace talks, the North Vietnamese Army started a concerted effort to overthrow the Republic of the Vietnam government in early 1975, and Saigon fell on the 29th of April 1975. At last, the war was officially over. Approximately 1,200 8th Ra men were among the more than 60,000 Australians who served in Vietnam, with over 500 fatalities and 3,129 wounded. So our remembrance service today is an act of mourning, especially for those 8th Ra men who fell in the Long Highs and elsewhere, and the many others who survived but continue to suffer. Let us pause in contemplation.
And whilst we're pausing in contemplation, perhaps we should extend our minds a little further than simply the fellows who died on that horrendous day on the 28th of February 1970, and we should think of the others that have fallen, not only whilst we're on active service or elsewhere, but also here in Australia. And with that in mind, we'll be addressing who has passed in fairly recent times. People like, of course, General Michael Jeffrey, who is so very special to us. At this point, whilst we're contemplating the loss of so many, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that we have a handful of the 1st Platoon veterans with us today. And the 1st Platoon, which some of you may not appreciate, were actually the chaps who bore the brunt of those horrific incidents on the 28th of February 1970. And those three, if I'm correct, please let me know if I'm wrong, include Jeff Ravenscroft, who I've spoken to already today, Ken Freeman, and Mick Prendergast. Mick, I spoke to you a short time ago as well. And I believe these chaps will be leaving after our service today to visit the grave of one of the fallen on that day in Larry McLennan, whose grave is at Keilor here in Melbourne. So having said that, please join me in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, for ever and ever. Amen. Mindful still of those who died while serving their country as members of the 8th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment, I'll ask now one of our branch association stalwarts in Bruce Langford to step forward and to read the honour roll of those who fell in South Vietnam in 1969-1970. Bruce Langford, thank you.
Thank you, Neil. The Roll of Honour of the men of the 8th Battalion, the Royal Australian Regiment, who fell whilst on active service in South Vietnam. Sergeant Alan William Ahern, Sergeant Douglas Alfred Baker, Corporal James Joseph Barrett, Private John Bressington, Private Philip Earl, Lance Corporal Philip Raymond Goody, Private Eric George Gould, Sergeant William Joseph Hoban, BEM, Corporal Robert James Jackson, Private Larry James McLennan, Private John Leonard McEwitt, Private Barry John Mundy, Private Stephen James O'Dowd, Private Timo Esko Antero Personen, Private Darryl Poulsen, Private Philip Mackay Richter, Private Victor Neil Wagstaff, and Private Gary Maxwell West. The following former 8th men were later killed in action in South Vietnam while serving with 7th Battalion. Lance Corporal Eric Halkyard, Private Raymond B. Patton, and Private Alan Talbot. In addition, the following 8th men died while serving in Malaysia or Australia. Those were Private Peter Allen Amos, Private Noel George Clare, Private Philip Barry Curtis, Private Warren Ernest Groves, Private Anthony Charles Payton, and Private John Remnant.
Thank you, Bruce Langford. As I suggested a moment ago, we've added something a little different today. Dennis thought that this might be a good idea, and I couldn't agree more with him. Every now and then we lose one of the flock, naturally, and as time goes by, more and more are going to be lost, and sometimes we're not always aware that one of our mates has passed on. So we're going to rectify that every now and again, as we are today, by perhaps reminding you or perhaps even telling you for the first time that we've lost one of the chaps. And for that reason, I'm going to ask Sylvie Smith to step forward in just a moment to read the list of names of those who have passed on in the last year or so. We won't necessarily do it next year, and if you feel it's inappropriate or you'd like some change, do let me know. But for today, Sylvie is going to read a list of those who've died in the last year or two as a tribute to those who have recently passed after their service with the 8th Battalion. Sylvie Smith.
Andropoth Nicholas, known as Nick. Ball, George Graham. Batty, David. Blair, Laurie Stomper. Byrne, Gary Edward. Campbell, John Ernest, known as Jack. Cheel, Rodney Gordon. Clark, Raymond James. Coleman, Ronald Alexander. Davis, Robert Julian, known as Bob. Devine, Daniel Raymond. De Heer, Daryl Vivian. Dent, Robert, known as Bob. Dunnicliffe, Kevin John. Jeffrey, Philip Michael. Langtree, John Osborne, known as Joel. Lay, Milton Robert. Lee, Graham Joseph Charles, known as Joe. McNaught, Alan. Melville, Barry. Nolan, Douglas. Norcott, Alan Charles. Parnell, Raymond John, known as Blue. Perandis, Kevin, known as Pedro. Rankin, David. Stevenson, Gordon Raymond. Taylor, Robert William. Timms, Ian Alexander. Venables, Dudley Robert. And finally, went Kevin Stanley, known as Lofty.
Thank you, Sylvie Smith. That's a rather frightening list of 30, as I recall, 30 of our men who've passed away in the last year or two. As we come to that point where we lay a wreath to those who've passed before us, and especially those who fell while serving with the 8th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment. And I know we have one wreath to lay, and Dennis, on our behalf, will lay that wreath. If there is anybody else who wishes to lay a wreath, then of course you're more than welcome. So Dennis Moss, please lay your wreath. I'd be delighted if somebody else was prepared to step forward and lay that wreath on behalf of the 8th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment. Grant Coultman Smith will be laying the second wreath. Thank you, Grant. In a moment, I'll be asking Grant to return to the mic. Grant, being one of the stalwarts in the association, has kindly offered to recite the Ode, Binion's first stanza from the poem The Ode, and which is normally recited on occasions such as this. After reciting the Ode, the last post will be played. Then there will be a minute's silence, after which you should repeat with Grant, lest we forget. Next will be the final bugle call, which is the rouse, and after that will be the national anthem. So I now invite Grant Coultman-Smith, OAM, to step forward for the ode recitation.
Thank you, Neil. They shall grow not old as we the left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Thank you.
The national anthem.
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. We've golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is girt by sea. Our land above
Guard, march off. Please be seated if you wish or you're able to sit. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our service today. Remains for me to thank those who have pulled it together, and those people include Dennis Moss, our President, Grant Koopman-Smith, who as always leaps forward to help out when necessary, Bruce Langford again similarly, Adrian Lombardo, representing the Shrine once again and present with us as a veteran himself with the battalion, my dear wife Sylvie for helping out today, and amongst the locals who've helped, I'm pleased to say that Dale Capron once again has led his invaluable assistance, and Dale is just there, and also the Shrine Guard, those two lads today from the Victoria Police Protective Services who provided our guard for us, and the name of those two chaps was Shane and John. So thank you to all of those. Now, as we already appreciate today, because of COVID restraints, the service has been streamed, and hopefully you'll be able to catch it later on, and urge those who may not have been here to try and have a look at it on the Shrine website. If you're having trouble getting through to it, send me an email and I'll give you some information. Now, as far as administration is concerned, I've got nothing else to say about today per se, but I would take this opportunity, bearing in mind that who knows, when we're actually going to meet again, that we take this opportunity to raise any points that we need to, and perhaps not plan, but just acknowledge the fact that we might be trying to do some other stuff later in the year. Because as you appreciate, we cannot go into the Shrine as we have done now for many, many years, courtesy of the hospitality of the Shrine, to have refreshments or a light lunch. So this is it. I mean, once we fall out here, we will not be meeting any further today. And goodness only knows when we can. So a couple of things for you to consider. I'd ask you in a moment if you have any news or anything any points you'd like to be made, and I'm always searching for material to put into 8-Ball for the next edition, which seems to come around with increasing rapidity every issue. So anything which is going on, people that you know of, people that are on the sick list, any particular news, I'll be pleased to hear it. If you feel that you would like something added or taken away from the service, again, please let us know. Dennis and I tried to add a little something this year with the list of those who have passed on. I personally think it can be quite useful to many of us who may not have our finger on the pulse of what else is going on in the association, not here in Victoria alone, but elsewhere in addition to that. And also last year, some of you, those of you who were here, will recall that we introduced a segment whereby we gave you a short bio of each one, or not of each one, but of 8 of the lads, or the 8 lads who fell on the 28th of February in 1970 who died. And if you'd like to continue that, I rather think it's a good idea, so that we've got a better understanding and we're better able to remember those who served and, of course, made the supreme sacrifice. And if you agree, then we'll pick up on that again next year on this service. I think that's all from me, so I'll now ask for anything from anybody who's in attendance today. Grant, you've got something?